Good morning and welcome to the 5th meeting in 2014 of the Health and Sport Committee. Usually at this point, can I ask everyone in the room to switch off mobile phones that we don't expect to be using and other wireless devices. You will note that some members of and officials are using tablet devices instead of hard copies of papers. I have apologies this morning for Dr Richard Simpson. The first item on the agenda today is a decision whether to take items 2, 3, 4 and 5 and 3, 4, 5 in private. Item 3 is consideration of the approach to the NHS Board's budget scrutiny, and item 4 is the evaluation of future plans for Ask the Health Secretary sessions, and item number 5 is our work programme. Do I have agreement from the committee to take those items in private? Yes. Thank you. Item number 2 this morning is the inquiry into support for community sport, and we now move to welcome Shona Robertson, Welcome Minister for Commonwealth Games and Sport, Scottish Government, Stuart Harris, Chief Executive of Sport Scotland, and David Grevenberg. Thank you. We was practising that for a while. We had a number of different versions. Chief Executive of Glasgow 2014. Welcome to you all this morning. I understand that the Minister is going to make a short opening statement and then we'll move to questions. That's okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the opportunity to update the committee. And I just want to start with the games, if that's okay. I think we're all very excited that we're going to see Glasgow welcome the world this summer. Scotland and Glasgow are certainly full of enthusiasm, and as we see the Queen's Baton really going through its journey across the Commonwealth, excitement certainly building. I was delighted back in October by the feedback from the Commonwealth Games Federation's Coordination Commission, with a very good report praising progress for the Games and commending the quality of the collaboration between Games partners. All new permanent sports venues within Glasgow are now complete and open for use by the community. Work is underway on the other temporary venues, including the transformation of Hampden Park, which of course will host the athletics competition during Games time. In addition, the Athletes' Village has been handed over to the organising committee and will certainly be a home-from-home facility for all athletes. And as I've said over the past year, the people of Scotland are truly excited for the arrival of the Games in Glasgow, and that has been shown in the response to applications to be volunteers and, of course, for ticket applications also. 94% of Games tickets are now sold. 5,000 legacy tickets to say thank you to individuals and groups involved in Legacy 2014 programmes have also been launched. On legacy more generally, we're currently delivering over 50 national legacy programmes. Research carried out on previous major events suggests that creating a legacy is a challenge and has to be worked on. That's why we've been working on it throughout the time that we earned the right to host the Games. So we've been working early and right the way through, and over the last 12 months, just to give you a couple of examples, we've seen 765 young people starting a sports or events related modern apprenticeship under the £2.5 million Legacy 2014 Employer Recruitment Incentive Programme. We've seen 64 projects across 20 local authorities being awarded £3.2 million under the £10 million Legacy 2014 Active Places Fund. And we've seen Scottish businesses win 73% of the Tier 1 Games contracts, and 300,000 young people benefiting from the Game On Scotland programme. Moving forward, although we're immensely proud of our elite athletes and take inspiration from them, we have to make sure that we focus on the bigger picture and ensuring that our sports at grassroots level are fit for purpose. We believe that the Commonwealth Games and the Ryder Cup will act as a catalyst to help harness that enthusiasm, but we have to make sure the capacity and the resource is in place, particularly if we get the expected bounce from those events that we're expecting. Support for volunteering remains a very key part of that, and it is certainly the backbone of sport in Scotland. A strong coaching and volunteering base is crucial for the delivery of that grassroots sport. A number of interventions are already in place to meet those challenges. We've had the investment of £10 million into club sport over the next 4 years to help them build capacity in a sustainable way. Expected that around 50 clubs will be supported through Sport Scotland's direct club investment. How we harness the enthusiasm and passion to deliver increased participation and increased physical activity will really define what sport will look like beyond this year. When I spoke to the committee in June last year, I highlighted the government's commitment to developing community sports hubs, bringing communities together in an accessible way, and I'm delighted that the more progress has been made since then. We currently have 126 community sports hubs, with 59% being in schools. I think that's a good achievement and well on our way to deliver at least 150 by 2016. Young people have been very much at the forefront of our ambitions for Scottish sport, and we're consulting at the moment on the youth sports strategy, which will be published this spring and will build on the work that's already been happening. Just a quick word about physical activity. Tomorrow I'm going to be launching the new physical activity implementation plan, which is a cross-government plan. Part of that is the new development of the new national walking strategy, which has been eagerly awaited, which is going to help us in our ambitions to get people more active. And just finally, we are working very hard with employers to become exemplars in helping their employees to become more fit. And again, tomorrow we'll be launching the Fit in 14 online campaign for employers to play their part. And finally, the Community Empowerment Bill that you'll be aware of is another opportunity to help us develop our sporting facilities locally in conjunction with communities. And I hope that you'll find some of that of interest as we move into questions. Thank you.
Minister, I think we had Gil Patterson was going to ask the first question. And then we've got a couple of
Thanks very much. Can you
Thanks,
morning, Minister. Sport Scotland audit of the school estates an important matter in regard to the prospect of children and people engaging. And, you know, it stands to reason that it's a great built estate there in place, and in many cases it's got really good equipment in place, but still a wee bit underutilised. And I'm just wondering what progress has been made and what levers and what enticements, if you like, and how encouraging has local authorities been to engage and free that up.
I'll hand over to Stuart in a second. If I could just say more generally that I think the report showed, on the positive side, that the school estate was perhaps more open than we thought it was, and that most of it is open. The issue was that there still was capacity that was underused within that estate, which is a challenge but also an opportunity, because it allows us to then pinpoint where we can help the local authority to really utilise that space more effectively. Stuart, do you want to?
Yep. We were pleased that, I guess I would probably point to our relationship with all 32 authorities being a strong point in getting the information, albeit it was a wee bit challenging. But now we have it in one place. I'll absolutely be categoric, as local authorities are keen to do better. As the Minister said, we reckon there's about 60% thereabouts of the capacity used currently in term time, slightly less in holiday time. And that gives us an absolutely specific conversation we can have with each authority about taking that forward. Now, that is on a number of fronts. It's about time allocation, it's about staffing levels, it's about whether the community can be actually given responsibility to take some of that forward themselves, and we'd be certainly up for those conversations. And really to try and achieve that mixed economy of pay and play, but also for clubs and community groups to be given the opportunity to expand, develop and be sustained. So we have got an agreement to take forward half a dozen authorities in depth immediately, but the aim is to get through all 32 in time. and to help them develop a better programme. And programming is really the answer. Who is working where, whether it's a club or it's pay and play or it's football. A greater degree of programming of these facilities is the way forward.
One of the things, in my own constituency, every high school is actually a PFI, PPP project, and I wonder if there's obstacles in the way, and if you are trying to engage with the companies that own these schools to free up the facilities. I've got to say, again, my experience is in each of the schools, the facilities are excellent. So there's no criticism of what's available. And again, so put it in public record, that I can see engagement with parks and floodlight football that the public can engage in. So that's a good thing. But I wondered in the bigger picture, with some of the stories that we heard, you know, in the past with regards to the cost attached to utilisation by the public. If that's been tackled, maybe I could say to you, are you engaged in a project freeing up the estate to utilise these PFI project facilities to free up, so that we, you know, these good facilities that are definitely there, we can get utilising them also.
Yeah, I mean, 10% of the secondary school estate is PPP or PFI. We are going to engage with each of the companies, with the local authority, in a sort of tripartite discussion. Some local authorities have had discussions, but I think Sports Scotland can lend some weight to that and maybe bring some answers and some solutions to the table. There's no doubt that 10% is a smaller percentage of the entire estate, but it's an important one, and one that we would like to take forward. I'm quite excited about having those conversations, because I think this is the right time to do it, with the games coming up and the fact that there's a big public commitment, I think, to the games and to young people in sport. So now would be the time, Gail, I think, to try and take that forward.
Follow up on that, you know, 90% of the school estate is, you know, up to us to make the best use of that. And what was depressing, I think, for us all, you know, was, well, except there is an opportunity to use that capacity more effectively, was the times at the school estate mainly, and these facilities were not available were in school holidays. You know, where it was rising, you know, and it's an average of, you know, what 60% were not available at weekends or school holidays. You know, we wonder how we could arrive at this point, but you know that the Commonwealth Games are this summer. We're a couple of months away from that, and we're speaking to 6 councils. So how can we step up and ensure that we create, as part of that legacy, more facilities during the summer for people to drop in free or pay or whatever. How can we make that happen in the summer, rather than, you know, even as a pilot or something, rather than, and recognise that we're so far off the pace that we have got, you know, a longer term challenge to bring these facilities, wonderful facilities in all of our communities, that are clearly being underused and need to be used more effectively.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. And I think what has changed, and I certainly sense this in my discussions with local authorities and with COSLA as well, is that we're moving away from the old discussions that we used to have about the problems of, you know, insurance, janitors, and you don't hear that so much. No. And I think there is a willingness now to really look at, well, so how do we open up the school estate in the summer? Is there more imaginative ways of being a bit more flexible with key holders? And the hubs are a good way of doing that, because you have a structure there in terms of who's using the school, and there's there's volunteers involved in that can obviously be part of the discussions about key holders. So there's some practical solutions to how do you get the school open, who takes responsibility, all of that. I think the good thing, though, is that, as I said, we're not having those rather tiresome discussions that we used to kind of have about, oh, it's all so difficult. And actually, I think that there is an appetite now to want to find solutions to opening up the estate. Stuart, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, convener, I maybe misled you a little bit with 6. We're talking to all 32 because we have relationships with all 32. In depth with 6, but all of our partnership managers are working with each of the authorities. The report's there, so the evidence is there. There's a real self-awareness now from local authorities and partners about the potential of that space. So I think everyone's now galvanised to do that. Community sport hubs, as the Minister said, 59% of the 126 we've got up and running are now in schools, and there's been some great examples of time allocation going from 5 hours to 38 hours. You know, and Armadale Academy moving from an additional 1/3 of time. So there's a lot more capacity being used and a lot more people, which I think what you're saying, driving towards that aim.
Yes, you know, I just understand it, but you know, it's just about building that urgency.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've achieved, since we last met, another 12 sports hubs on stream in 8 months. You know, we're slow with the strategies. There is a frustration. I'm not, but you know, and I know that you know, you just can't make these things happen overnight, and I'm sure you share the frustration. But you know, the sports strategies, and you know, even in the last week, you know, looking at the various websites about what's available and what's not available, the cost, it's not easy to find out what's available in local authorities across Scotland and their websites, how much it will cost to drop in and pay and play or whatever. It's not easy to work out what it would cost for the family to you know, there's a... Now, I'm saying that it's a big challenge for us all, but what, you know, do we need additional resources there from Sports Scotland? Do we need a greater focus on this issue alone? You know, or do we go on as we've been going on?
Well, you'll notice that one of the things we were consulting on in the youth sports strategy was to have either every school, secondary school, a community sports hub, or have access to one. So that's one of the main things we were consulting on, about how do we do that. So it really puts an extra driver into opening up that school estate, including during the summer holidays. And we're very keen to take that forward as the next phase, if you like, of opening up the school estate and of creating more hubs, but focusing those very much around the secondary school estate. So that's the reason why we did that, was to give that additional impetus to the secondary school estate and opening that up. And I'm hoping that's something we'll take forward after the consultation.
Bob Doris.
I thank the convener for that. I think I may have just slightly used up one of my committee members, but it's a similar theme of questioning that I have. So 17 different sports across the Glasgow 2014. So whether it's badminton or swimming or gymnastics or personal interest, as Mr Harris will know, in weightlifting with all the Gladiators project in Easterhouse, we don't know where, say, the Scottish successes will come, but we do know where the Scottish successes come. That's likely to drive greater participation in those particular sports. So if today I went onto the Glasgow 2014 website and thought, I want to play badminton, I want to go swimming, I want to do gymnastics, I want to do weightlifting, would I be signposted in Glasgow to where those opportunities are? Because we've got a window of opportunity where people are absolutely keen to get involved and participate, and they'll go on the website, they'll click on and they'll say, where can I do the weightlifting? Where can I play badminton? Where can I go swimming? How well thought out, or is the strategy still unfolding about where my constituents and myself, hopefully, can go along and participate in these sporting activities when we get inspired by, hopefully, Scottish and international successes in Glasgow Games?
Well, if I could start to answer that, and I'll bring David and Stuart in. Yeah, I mean, we've certainly been encouraging local authorities to present information in a simple way so that people can see what's going on in their area. We've also tried to gather that on a national basis through the Legacy 2014 website, so that we can tell people what's going on in their area. Now, obviously, that's only as good as the information that populates it. And it very much depends on kind of linking into local information channels. So we're not complacent about that by any manner of means, and I think we are stepping up work to make sure that it's as simple as possible and that people can find their way to, as you say, the local badminton club or the athletics. The governing bodies as well have a lot of good information within their websites, but again, it's about making it simple for people and signposting people to the right place. So yes, we're certainly on the case with that, and we'll make sure that by the time we get to games time that it's as easy and straightforward and joined up as it can be. David, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think the website is obviously a great starting point. In a number of initiatives and with partners, we have signpost a lot of opportunities. Volunteering in particular has been one that certainly has been a real success. Working very closely with Skills Development Scotland, Volunteer Scotland as well, we've been able to take the momentum built behind the 50,811 applications and really create a tremendous amount of momentum that I think will really benefit people well into the future. Whether it's volunteering for the games themselves or other opportunities. We actually had a remarkable rate of interest of 86% of those 50,811 people actually said they would like more information on volunteering opportunities. So we essentially had all the approval from them to pass their names on to Volunteer Scotland, and now they're part of a broader database. In terms of our own website as well, and all of our little microsites as well, we're always looking at different ways of enhancing community engagement and promoting the longer-term legacy. So in the sport-specific sites, there are links to international federations, national federations, and the like. And so a real narrative around these games is the ambitions behind the game. So I think that element is certainly embedded, but I'm happy to take a look from the committee and see if there's ways that we can even further enhance that as we get towards the big push, which is going to be, okay, now what's next? And I'm happy for us to take a quick look at that and see if there's ways of even refining that.
Actually, sorry, Mr. Harrison, were you going to come in there?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that. The answer to your question is probably even more local than the Glasgow area. Inside communities themselves is where it will happen, and this is where we're quite excited about the role community sports hubs will play. And there's lots of other groups that are around that consider themselves hubs. We're focusing a little bit on a group that we're helping to get to that place. So the target of 150, 126. That's what's exciting about this at the moment, is we're seeing local growth driven by local people in their own area. So there's a greater understanding of what's available in that area. Even if you look at a wide area like Glasgow, it's still quite daunting. So community sport hubs having their own sites, we're talking to all local authorities about an integrated approach and to break that down into community areas. It'll be an ongoing process, there's no doubt about that, but there's a commitment to really make information accessible.
I should stress that with 32 local authority areas, but it's reasonable I just present the one that I'm a member for. But I mean, it's just, you talk about a lot of detailed work behind the scenes, but to the person in the street, they'll be inspired. They'll go on the Glasgow 2014 website, notice what they click on, click participate or play, and they'll just want a fast link to the local badminton club, whether it's via their postcode they put in, or a fast link to the local weightlifting club. And that, I know it's only as good as the information that Glasgow 2014 gets, but at the moment it doesn't appear as if that facility is available. And I'm delighted that Mr Grevenberg has said you'll go away and you'll look at that to see if you can create that. So it doesn't matter whether it's Inverness or whether it's Springburn, you put in your postcode, you click badminton, and it tells you where the opportunities are for all the sports. And we won't actually know which ones will be most popular because I suspect that will be partially based on where achievement comes for our own participating athletes. My second question, Convener, was linked to that. The London experience was that it depends where the successes comes, as we say, where young people in particular turn up and want to get involved in a sport. Has Glasgow 2014, in conjunction with local authorities, tried to estimate where, predict where that success may or may not come, and what, say, a 10% increase and people wishing to participate in any particular sport, what kind of pressures that would put on local sports facilities. In other words, is the capacity there in each local authority area to expand when people wish to participate? Because in the London Games, some of the information starting to emerge as the capacity wasn't there.
Sports Scotland have been focused very much on that in discussions with the governing bodies about those sports that are likely to see, I mean, they all will see a bounce, almost certainly, but focusing with those clubs that have got the capacity to expand. The club direct investment has been part of that to help them grow, train up volunteers, coaches. Stuart, do you want to say a bit more?
Yeah, you know, I actually do, just to reiterate with the ministers, I think it'll be all sports. And one of the things we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, preparing for this, has been working with local agencies, not just the authority, to build that capacity. And it's a continuing process of freeing up, accessing, reprogramming. And as a national agency, we'll try and add some value to that by, as again the Minister said, directly funding certain clubs so we can look at how that capacity can be grown. Members will probably remember me talking about it's fine qualifying volunteers and coaches, but if they don't have a space to work in, then you can't really grow. So I think we've made a lot of progress. A good example, again, one for the World Junior Championships in netball. Netball Scotland saw, and you know, Scotland really struggled in that, but yet they saw a huge interest from young people in Scotland for the game. So I think there'll be an opportunity across all sports. It's very difficult to target that. I think our aim as Sports Scotland is to create as many opportunities that are locally sustainable, and that doesn't always include every sport, but locally sustainable, that could take capacity forward. And I think we'll continue to do that with the partners that we have locally.
Okay, can you do that?
Just on the issue, David, of the sports clubs themselves that have been spoke about this morning, and indeed participants, an issue that was raised by me and maybe to some of the others, that the sports clubs and likely whatever, the weightlifters, weren't given a priority or a privilege to get access to the tickets. Is that the case? Is it, or if it is the case, was it not a bit of a mistake not to ensure that those young people who are participating in sport got the opportunity from wherever they are in Scotland to visit the games?
I think that there's a couple of elements to the ticketing program. In March 2012, our board outlined the outcomes sought from the ticketing program. And as you would expect, of course, fill the stadia, meet your target revenue. But one that was quite, and you may say that that's conflicting with that, was to actually have an accessible and inclusive ticketing program. What we did with that program was we made 70% of the tickets minimum available to the general public for every single session. And that is, it really has been almost unheard of. We offered concession prices because we wanted as many people as possible to be able to get involved. What we also did was working through Commonwealth Games Scotland, which was our conduit to the SGBs, or the Scottish Governing Bodies of Sport, was looking at ways of ensuring that they had adequate numbers as well. But the principle that we had is that we would open this up really to as many people as possible, create the policies that would support that in terms of concession pricing and so forth for under 16s and over 60s, and not to really take just an exclusive approach to that. It was much more inclusive. On top of that, we've also created a number of initiatives that the Scottish Government has embraced, that Glasgow City Council has embraced in terms of recognition and this concept of a gift of the games program, which we've been also working on, and there's an element of that with Glasgow that we will be also, Glasgow 2014 will also be implementing, that reaches out to more diverse populations even further than what we've already been able to reach. So we've really felt that that program has really reached out to a number of people and the public, and we've continued to work with Commonwealth Games Scotland and the like to ensure that, you know, Scottish governing bodies and so forth have been embraced around this. But, you know, I have to say there's also still tickets available, which
takes me to my next point, I suppose. if there are tickets available. Is there any possibility of re-looking at that? You know, given it comes to you, through us that people are expressing that concern. You'll imagine within the athletic clubs locally and in sporting clubs locally, why didn't they, when we have this opportunity, you know, give us some sort of privilege or promotion from people who participate and deliver sports that's right on our doorstep? You know, is there anything can be done about that?
I think from our standpoint, I mean, more tickets will be made available closer to the games, and so for people to watch that space. I mean, we're still very much in the sales process right now, and we want to sell as many tickets as possible, obviously, because that relieves the public purse as well. So that's really where we're focused right now. And we would just tell people we still have 5 months to the games. More opportunities to be part of the games will be made available in the various sports. But at the same time, there are some in some of the other sports. I think we still have 6 or 7 sports that we still have tickets available that we encourage people to get out there and purchase tickets.
I'll leave that one with you and the Minister. Maybe you can work something out for these sports clubs then.
If I could just add to that in addition to the affordability of tickets, which I think is a strong point and very different from London, I mean, the average price of tickets is very affordable, with the concession prices as well is good. But the legacy tickets are very much focused on what the folk you're talking about, folk who are interested in sport. They maybe go along every week and they're up-and-coming athletes potentially who have shown a keen interest. So the legacy tickets that we've announced, Glasgow have announced, and there'll be more on that, an element of those have those folk in mind. It's about encouraging How do they go about getting their hands on some of these tickets? What we're doing with our legacy tickets, Glasgow are doing theirs in a bit of a different way, but what we're doing with our legacy tickets is through our agency. So Sports Scotland will get an element of those legacy tickets, and through their clubs and governing bodies will distribute them.
So there is a route for those people who are
yes. We can't guarantee that a person in a particular club will get one of those, but certainly it's going to be done on the basis of fairness, that people who are committed to their sport, that both on the volunteer level at local clubs, but also participants. So there is a route. I just can't guarantee that everybody.
I understand that.
But we did it with very much that in mind.
When will those be available for?
Over the next few weeks, all of the agencies involved are going to be looking in detail about how they make it a fair process in terms of the allocation of those tickets and sports.
Yeah, and there'll be a bit of dialogue between the various agencies as well to make sure we have a comprehensive cover. Yeah. We at the moment are looking at community sport hubs and getting right into communities and trying to excite them about being part of the games.
I hesitate to say this, we were one of that division about the traditional clubs and the sports hub.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I'd offer that as a bit of advice given the evidence that we had.
Fine.
Aileen?
Thanks very much, Kevin. Minister, just wanted to ask questions around the draft, the youth sports strategy itself, which obviously was published last December. And I was to ask you about what the next steps were towards publishing the final strategy, which I think you said in your opening remarks was to be published in spring.
Well, it's open for consultation until the 2nd of March, and then we'll be looking to publish later in the spring of this year. We've been really keen as part of the consultation to involve young people, which is challenging, but we've really gone out of our way, and organisations like Young Scot have been really, really helpful, in the Young People's Sports Panel as well, involving young people at the heart of this strategy so that we can get it right. So a lot of work has gone on to build on the draft consultation. We've had a lot of feedback from a lot of governing bodies, sports organisations, as you can imagine, and we're going to be taking all that on board. The Young People's Sports Panel will be analysing the responses as well and giving us their view of the feedback from the consultation, and we're going to pull all of that together. There's been a number of very good suggestions that have come in, and we want to try and reflect all of that in the final strategy that is produced.
Sure, and one of the key aspects, or one of the key actions within the draft youth strategy, was for involving disabled young people fully in PE and sports provision. And obviously since the Paralympic Games in 2012, we've seen a lot of interest in disability sport. I mean, I've got my own example in the region I represent, South of Scotland, where the Dumfries and Galloway branch of sports, Scottish Disability Sports, they recorded a fantastic success last year at the National Junior Championships for swimmers with a sensory impairment or physical disability. With the region swimmers were well represented in the medals table. So it's awful, it's vital that we are inclusive and that we can use the youth sports strategy as a way in which to offer opportunities for all of our young people. Now, in the written evidence that the committee received from the Scottish Disability Sport, they mentioned the development of a sports inclusion model. And obviously, key is ensuring that our clubs are being inclusive and that the coaches and volunteers are educated and trained. So just really to give maybe perhaps to the Minister to give an update to the committee in terms of the progress on how the sports inclusion model is being developed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key things back from the consultation was about access and making sure that hubs, clubs were accessible and building around an inclusion model so that it's part of the way clubs go about their business. Sport Scotland have done a lot of work around that to make sure that the work that they do with clubs and indeed the funding that goes to clubs and hubs is tied very much to clubs being open and inclusive. And we'll certainly be pulling all that together, listen very much to what SDS have said, and I think there's a big opportunity to make sure that the youth sports strategy kind of lifts that up a level and drives that forward even more. So we know what works. There's funding to encourage that as the model, and I think we just need to make sure that the strategy lifts that up a gear. Stuart, do you want to say a little bit?
Yeah, we're really encouraged by what's happening in schools around the PE work as well, because I think, again, members will remember that we've talked about an ambitious system for sport in Scotland, so it's school, club and performance all connected, resourced. There's a commitment both nationally and locally to those and to all of the young people in Scotland inclusively, and I think that's really, really important. Just to build on the disability focus in around hubs and clubs, and I think it is both, and to reassure the convener, the £10 million that we've put aside and to invest over the next 4 years is mainly aimed at the traditional sports club, as well as the £1.5 million around community sport hubs per annum. And we're quite excited about what we're seeing. I think the Paralympic Games did a great job in bringing disability and the achievements of people into people's front rooms. And we now have, I think, a real acceptance of the way forward together, which I think is tremendous. And I look forward to greater progress. And it's one of these things that we seem to have a lot of commitment for, and we'll take it forward. We will, as Sport Scotland, be talking to Scottish Disability Sport soon about their forward plans and how we might take forward opportunities together.
Thank you. I think one of the, well, it's not directly related to the youth sports strategy. Commonwealth Games has obviously a very complementary narrative and piece to the puzzle. Certainly with Commonwealth Games, it does have a fully integrated program. We have the largest para-sport program ever on offer at a Commonwealth Games with 22 medal events over five sports. But also the way that we are approaching these particular games are really setting some new standards for future games to come, but also, I would say, major events in Scotland. Certainly on the bounce in the back of the Commonwealth Games, the Paralympic Games in London, certainly set the bar very high. But in many respects also has given us real inspiration to push forward with the agenda, whether it's the approach that we're taking to delivering the venues and ensuring that there is a dignified, independent, once-in-a-lifetime, world-class experience for all patrons. We've been able to trickle it down through our ticketing program, our volunteering opportunities for people with a disability. So a very empowering model, which I think will only further raise the bar and the agenda. And at the same time, we've also embedded an integrated approach in how we promote the games as well. So we use people with a disability in our communication and our promotion as well. So from that standpoint, I think it complements a lot of the good work that's already already being done.
And just to add to that and what Stuart have said, the Sports Scotland are in discussions with SDS about taking that to another level in terms of a SDS Athlete Academy, providing a pathway for young disabled athletes who want to, or who are inspired and show some promise in a particular sport and want to take that further. I think that would be a really exciting development, and again, we're happy to keep the committee informed about those discussions as they go forward.
Rhoda? Grant.
Can I mean, there's a lot of talk about legacy from the games, and, you know, having spoken to people from other areas which have hosted games, legacy always seems to be very difficult to pin down. Can I ask what you would view as a successful legacy from the games?
We're going to measure success over 10 years, and we're doing that because you can't measure it in a matter of weeks after the games. In some ways, the work really started the day we won the right to host. But as you know, legacy programmes take a long time to come to fruition and to really show the benefits. So that's why we're working with the statisticians. We've put a lot of programmes in place. I know Richard Simpson had a lot of interest in this in the early days about the data sets that were going to measure this success. So a lot of work has gone on to put those in place so that over milestones along that 10-year period, we can measure in a more in-depth way what success looks like. So how many more people are active, measuring things like participation in sport within communities, within hubs, rather than maybe the one or two snapshot measurements that we have at the moment. The Scottish Household Survey is one. It's a good survey, but it only shows that moment in time, and it's very much about self-reporting. Whereas some of the measurements that we're putting in place are a bit more drilling down in that. They're looking at how active young people of all ages are being within their community and measuring that. The economic benefits, clearly, again, we're putting measurements in place to look at the ongoing legacy from that. There's a lot of very detailed work going on in the East End of Glasgow itself to measure the impact of regeneration on that community. So on a whole range of levels and a whole range of legacy areas, we are trying to make that as comprehensive as possible so that along the milestones in a year's time and 5 years' time and 10 years' time, we're able to comprehensively tell the story of what legacy has looked like from the Games. I'm not sure that's been done in that way before. I know there's been attempts to do it, but we believe this is a better way of telling the full story rather than one measurement and a snapshot in time. You have to look at it, and it's an evolving process over that 10-year timescale.
Will we have access to those measurements? So
absolutely.
As a committee, we can follow that through.
Absolutely. All of that is going to be in the public domain. We have put the data measurements in the public domain, so the baselines are all there, and it will be a comprehensive package of information. And I think I've said before, you know, very keen to keep the committee updated about that. So as reports come in and as that data set is populated over periods of time, very happy to make sure the committee's cited on all of that, and it will all be in the public domain anyway.
I could probably just add a little bit to that if that's okay.
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Go on.
Just to say that I think one of the things that we've been quite popular for saying is that the ambition behind the Games was probably greater than the Games themselves in some respects. And so from an organising committee standpoint, to have such commitment and ownership, essentially, of the legacy agendas, both on a local level at Glasgow City Council level and then, of course, on a national level from the Scottish Government standpoint, is really a breath of fresh air in the world of sport in many respects. I mean, I have to say that some of the narrative that we've been using quite often lately has been, as we're engaging more and more people with the Games, is have you practiced legacy today? Legacy is not something that actually happens to you; it happens by you. And so that's a friendly challenge to people to say, get engaged, and find new ways of being inspired and actually making a difference with that inspiration. I'd have to say that probably 3 areas come to mind right off the top of my head in terms of that we've already started to see a big impact. I mean, if you measure legacy on a generational impact, no question the facilities and infrastructure projects that have been delivered well before the Games that are both community relevant and world class will be gifts that keep on giving. Whether it's to Glasgow and Scotland or further afield, certainly I think there's just some fantastic stories and venues that are really having an impact now that, and certainly have been inspired by the Games and aren't just necessarily for the Games. I think the second point is how the 3 sectors are working together. The public, private, and third sector are working together smartly. We would not have had nearly the success that we had without this partnership working. And that's a true testament to the volunteer program, the ticketing program, our community engagement programs. That is the 3 sectors working smarter together to make a difference. And our sponsors have gotten on board and recognize that community engagement, community benefit, and corporate social responsibility through these Games is really a powerful vehicle. And I think last but not least is that the reputation and recognition over this 10-year journey that Scotland has travelled in terms of hosting this fantastic event has, no question, raised the profile in terms of reputation and recognition as Scotland as a fantastic place to be entertained, do sport, live, and do business. And I think from that standpoint, it'll only get stronger.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of detail to what the Minister said, we now have, because Active Schools have been in place now for 10 years, we now have a note of every club that's connected to every school in Scotland. Community Sport Hubs, similarly, you drop underneath that. We have the list of the 29 clubs in Armadale. Underneath that, we have all the participation data with each of those clubs that we can measure constantly now. And I think this gives us a tool we haven't had before. And it allows us, like the school estate stuff, allows us to have very specific conversations to actually analyse where we're being successful and analyse where we need to make improvements. And I think that commitment to continually improve is where we're at. We also know that it costs £62,000 per annum to make Armadale sustainable. We have a figure for each one of those clubs and hubs now. Again, I'll just re-emphasise it is both clubs and hubs that we're currently supporting. So from that perspective, that's exciting. It allows us to take it forward. Now, the outcome for me would be a greater degree of sustainable community sport that's embedded in communities and has the ability to grow. And for us to expand that when resources allow, both nationally and locally. But it's much more, rather than being delivered to the community, it's about the community taking things forward themselves. And I think that's the exciting thing for me about the Games going forward.
Could I point Rhoda Grant and others to the Assessing Legacy 2014 website, because it's got the range of indicators tracked from the baseline back in 2008, and it was last updated in December last year. So it's a sort of ongoing process, and if you have a look at that, it should give you the current position, but that will go on and be continually populated and measured against the baseline indicators.
Can I just ask, given that the Glasgow Commonwealth Games Committee will cease to exist after the Games, who will be responsible, who will be in charge of the legacy, who will be taking it forward? You know, I understand what you're saying about community and all the different layers, but you know, once you remove the focus of a committee that are there looking at something, how do you make sure that focus remains?
Well, the other Games partners will do that, essentially Scottish Government and the agencies involved, Sport Scotland and others, the Glasgow City Council, and we've agreed between Scottish Government and Glasgow City Council to really work together around telling, bringing all the legacy information together. So our website, I suppose, the Assessing Legacy website will continue to be the focus post-Games of information populating that source of information. Glasgow have their own legacy information site as well. So they're telling a very much a Glasgow-focused story. Obviously, we're telling the Scotland-wide focus, but again, sharing information so that we can tell the full story. So, to cut a long story short, ourselves and Glasgow City Council will be the key partners in making sure that that continues.
Armadeo's a good example of, I think what we'd be looking for, not just the inputs, but monitoring that ongoing and being able to look at the outcomes as well. And the 126 sports hubs that we have, is that in place at all of those sport hubs?
103 sets of data, but the aim is to have it in them all.
Yeah.
I think you and I had a discussion the last time about this. I really feel strongly about how powerful that local information is.
Yes.
And for the first time, as I say, it gives us that opportunity to really analyse it. And what's even better, it gives the people who are running the clubs and the hubs the chance to say, we need to do this better, we can work better with another club across the road. It's real potential, and we've never had this before. And I think for the first time, if there's an outcome from the games that I'm really excited about, it's the information that gives us that
How
power.
many? What is our target for sports hubs? What does that 126 represent in terms of the schools in Scotland?
Well, at the moment, I think 59% of those are in schools, and we had a target of 50%. We wanted at least half of those hubs to be in schools, and I think it's sitting at about 59%. So when we get to the 150 by 2016, we'll be quite confident that at least half of those will be in schools. Clearly, the youth sports strategy kind of next phase of sports hubs is very much focused around secondary schools, and we're in discussion with Sports Scotland about what that might look like in the detail, laying out what happens after 2016.
Yes,
so we want to keep, it's a model that works, so why would we not want to do more of it? I think the question is, how do we focus more of that within schools, because there's lots of different models for hubs, and we don't want to stop any of those happening because they're good, but we think that it ties so much up with opening up the school estate in a managed way that we want to really step up that side of things, and that's where we're looking at that.
What information have we got on the 1,300 sports clubs that are in Scotland? Have we got any of any of that analysis and that? Because I see from local activity, a bit of tension between local clubs and their national associations. I don't see any of it. They say to me, I don't see any of this coming down to me. I don't see any benefit coming down to me. They're using it in other ways. So what are we getting from the 1,300? How do we help them? And
Yep, I mean, where we're at with it is very similar to what we're doing with hubs. I'll just give you a little breakdown of the resources that are now going into it. I think the figure's 13,000. I'm not sure if you said 1,300, but it's 13,000 sports clubs. Most of which are very small entities that are not really sustainable. So bringing people together has been a deliberate track that we've been on, which is making things much more sustainable. The direct club investment strand, which is Sports Scotland direct to the club, will see us over the next 4 years have 200 clubs, and a part of the deal is that you provide us with information on a regular basis. The other element of the £10 million was the 48 regional development officers through governing bodies. So again, that partnership, national to local, capacity building. Each of those officers, and I was able to actually do an induction with all of them, where I was very clear is the only conversation I want to have with them in a year's time is, where's the list of clubs you've been working with? What's the information you have from them? And what do you see as success with each of them? Now, we estimate, again, that if each of those 48 officers has around 6 or 7 clubs initially, you can see we're building up to quite a big total of individual geographic hubs and clubs that will give us that kind of data. And again, there's a general invitation to any of the members that if you want to talk about that any more, about your own area, I'm happy to do that and happy to take you through it.
The national associations, have any of those national associations had their funding reviewed, or as you can review their funding if you don't believe they're delivering? Is that correct? Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an ongoing thing for us. We will review. Each sport will work on a 4-year cycle. We expect them to have a 4-year plan. We have some sports who are weaker than others in either the governance, development or performance area, and we will take an action with them. Now, the action is in 2 forms.
One, we can take a very supportive action, which we do anyway. We're working with each of the sports and their continually improvement and on their improvement models. But also, if things are getting difficult, we would not hesitate to take some resources away, and we have taken some performance programmes in-house in Sport Scotland. But the ultimate aim is to build the sport back up again. It's not a punitive measure. Just taking funding away is not an action in isolation. It should be about improving governance, and we have taken some very strong action against gymnastics, you'll probably remember, and we have had one or two other very difficult conversations with certain governing bodies, and we wouldn't hesitate to continue to do that going forward.
Part of the key outcome for the funding agreement is obviously performance is one, and making sure that on the elite side that targets are met, but the other strand is participation and setting targets with governing bodies around the growth of participation, and that has to be done obviously through the clubs. So there's then a conversation with the governing body and the clubs about growth and participation. That sometimes is a difficult conversation as well. I mean, it's part of, I suppose, human nature sometimes that folk like to just be left to get on with the way things have always been done. It doesn't mean it's the best way, though, in terms of opening the doors and growing participation. That can sometimes be quite a difficult conversation to have, but by linking the funding, I suppose, to increase in participation, improved governance, improved performance, it's a way of using that to drive opportunities for young people and to make that more systematic. And that's a big change over the last few years from how it used to be done, and I think, though, it's the right way when you're using public money.
We've heard in evidence, Stuart, that there are particular groups and geographical areas where partition is particularly low or lower than. We can all point to successful clubs in our own communities, volunteers competing with one another in one end of the town and no volunteers in another end of the town, good facilities in the wrong areas, tribalism, all sorts of barriers that are in there. Is there special measures, is there areas that we have identified there where we need to do more, and there's special measures you can take to create some advantage out of that disadvantage, if I can put it that way?
One of the things, again, I'm repeating myself, but hopefully you begin to understand why. I mean, in creating a system or a more systematic approach in Scotland, which is not project-based, it's about infrastructure. So in school, in communities, I think we're getting to a place now where we have a foothold in every school in the country. We are now creating a fairly sizable group and cohort of clubs. Now that we have that, we can begin to look at where special measures may be required in conjunction with local agencies, and I would stress that we can't do this top-down. This very much is about the relationship we have with our local partners. But I think the potential we have now, and again I'm stressing this, the potential we have with 3 or 4 years down a track to creating a sustainable legacy for community sport that I don't think anybody else in any other games has got near. We're excited about it. We don't underestimate the challenge of sustainability, because there needs to be a local commitment to it as well. And I know that local authorities are going through tough times, budget-wise, and we continue to have conversations with them about maintaining that, seeing the value of sport in communities and communities of sport. I think it's really important. And, again, members around the table, politicians nationally and locally, again, we'd like to have a conversation, because I think you can all help.
One of the discussions we're having, which might probably interest you, Convener, is that around the next phase of community sports hubs and the focus on schools, what more can we do for those schools that are located in more deprived communities? So is there a need for us to do something a bit more targeted to encourage those schools to become hubs, and supporting the clubs in that community who might not have the same kind of volunteer capital that other clubs might have in other areas, so they're facing maybe a few more difficult challenges. So what more can we do to target those schools and those communities to make sure that young people in those areas are getting the same opportunities through their school estate being open and hubs being vibrant and working in new clubs and new sport opportunities that they might not otherwise get. So we're having that conversation at the moment very much about how do we do that and what would we do.
Colin Kerr.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for the comments. I'm taking quite a lot out of that. I'm absolutely delighted that you're having conversations with the local authorities and PFI, PPP contractors, because certainly over the last 6-7 years in my area, we've had no shortage of problems with most, a number of the schools which were rebuilt. My own old school, in fact, was a prize example where the only thing that was really kept from the original school was the bottom football pitch. When we tried to put a football pitch in there, they said, oh, you can't because it's down in the plans as being a green space, which just seemed to be absolutely daft, but that's how it was contracted. And they still to this day have not done anything about it. The other thing was, of course, the hub that's around my area, 5 minutes up from where I live, which is wonderful facilities. But actually, every time when I used to hold a surgery there, there was next to nobody actually there. And the inability, an empty swimming pool was there, but couldn't be used because people couldn't just walk in and use it. And so, I mean, if there's any improvement in that way, that would be absolutely fantastic. You'll know, I'm sure the Minister will be fed up with hearing me rattling on about the what happens later on when the elitist, going before the elite period, if you like. How do we keep people involved afterwards in terms of where there's a fair dropout of youngsters, particularly around about the sort of mid-late teens? What are we actually doing to try and keep these teenagers involved in sports?
Can I just say a word about the we've obviously talked already about the challenges of PFI and PPP, although I think there's more of an ability to have a conversation about access now. A lot of these contracts are quite old, and I think there's discussions that are being had around better access, and those will continue. But one of the important things you might have seen in the youth sports strategy was the role of Sport Scotland in having earlier discussions around the new school building programme, so that instead of it being at the kind of end of the process, that it's at the beginning around the sports facilities within that school. And sometimes some simple changes can make all the difference when it comes to the actual use of a building and the sports facilities within it. And so that's quite an important change, and we're keen to see that happen. In terms of the dropout, we have been working to look at life-changing moments. So when a young person leaves school, how do you keep them active, which is where the colleges and universities have become really important in linking to trying to make sure that young people who have been quite active in sports school don't stop being active when they go to college and university. And there's a lot of really proactive work going on at identifying people and keeping them active. Also encouraging them into coaching potentially, and coaching opportunities, some actually while they're still at school. A lot of senior pupils going down the coaching road, which is good and a great resource. So there's definitely more that we need to do around that, and we're always looking at ways of trying to make sure people don't slip through the net. Stuart?
Yeah. It sounds a wee bit simplistic, but the answer is to make the sport more accessible locally, because I think young people in particular are more likely, and it's the evidence we're hearing from talking to them across the range of outlets that we have, that they would participate if it was just on their doorstep. So that's why we've talked about using the school estate more, and to have, and I think it's important, the Minister made a point there, and I think is key, because there are more young people now involved in leadership, there are more young people involved in working through hubs and clubs, and that attracts other young people to stay. It's not just an adult environment, it's something that is they can identify in terms of their peer. But it has to be local, and I think Scotland, for me, is well set up to do that. I mean, we have lots of towns and distinct communities that each has to be provided for. You can't take a global look at it. So whilst there's a national picture that we can help with, we're very much getting into individual communities with our local partners to try and arrest those kind of trends that you're talking about. And we're seeing a huge amount of, I think, positive direction in that, in that area.
Because there's a huge jump in terms of when you head to the competitive side between somebody who's, say, 18 and 22 or 23, in some sports particularly. And that area there was a place where you're kind of between 17 and 23, if you like, because the jump between age group, say, athletics, to 17 competing with those people who are more mature is quite a jump in some cases, and there is quite a dropout route. Could I ask you, in terms of, you're talking about the partners and getting into the localities and whatever, and one of the things that we do have throughout the country is a number of traditional public parks with pavilions and stuff like that, which certainly, and I have to show an interest here as a member of a particular rugby club, which is, let's just say, pretty clapped out, and and this is not unusual throughout the country, I've noticed. But how can you get involved with these people and try and, it's not quite the hub. The hub's about a mile or so up the road, but this is a long-established club in this instance. I could mention a couple of dozen others in the Edinburgh area that are the same. But how can you get involved with these clubs to actually sort of help them, and dealing with particularly the local trusts or the council, which tend to run these parks and pavilions and can be a bit restrictive at times?
There's two tracks in which we can help there. One, our annual conversation with local authorities and their trusts usually, although not always, and that's something we always insist on now, is make sure everyone's around the table when we're talking about this. Is we try and project ahead where the facility priorities will be at all levels. So whether it be adjustments to a sports centre, a new centre, a new school, or public parks and clubs. So we're actually looking at the public sector and also the voluntary sector. So any club can apply direct to us, can have a conversation with us about their changing facilities. We've had some really great projects. The emphasis for us right now is on clubs, as you probably gathered, with both the hub and club strands. People development and facility development goes alongside it. So happy to talk either through the governing body or direct to the club. We can bring resources to that.
Yeah, it's a common thread that I've come across. It's the fact that perhaps the club's ambition is perhaps a bit more than the trust's ambition.
Well, Sport Scotland can sometimes be a good can bring parties together where there's sometimes difficult discussions, and that's happened quite a lot. But the Active Places Fund was set up with very much that type of thing in mind, that we wanted a fund that could be reasonably easily accessed. Obviously, a case needs to be made, and they have to show that it's going to lead to kind of growth and participation and stuff like that. But it was for the doing up the pavilion or creating the changing rooms, reasonably small amounts of money, reasonably quickly released to make the difference to help a club to move on and be a more inviting environment. That's exactly what that fund was for. So there's probably, sounds like there's a conversation maybe to be had with the organisations in your area.
I think it's really important that actually intelligence like that is really helpful, because our aim is to make sure that everyone who can contribute locally does so in an integrated environment. And sometimes there are disparity in ambition, but we're prepared to get into those conversations and mediate if required, because I think you can accelerate those solutions by just having someone there who can bring some resources. I think it's important. It gives us a lever. We can bring some resources.
It's just the difficulty with the fact that the public park is council owned. The facility itself is run by a trust, and there's a club there on a long-term lease. So you have a sort of three-way problem where perhaps the local authority doesn't have the funds, the trust isn't that interested really, because it's not perhaps one of the big areas of expertise, shall we say, and you've got a club that's sitting there. As I say, it's not just the one that I happen to be a member of. There's this you could go all over Lothians and probably Scotland.
There's some good examples already where, again, there's a negotiation, and it can take time with the local authority or the trust about giving over on a long-term lease the pitches as well as we will explore all those models. This is exactly what I was saying earlier on. There's a mixed economy which I think would be very, very vibrant across Scotland, where you have pay and play for people that can choose, and on the other side we've got clubs and hubs who are more sustainable in their own areas and facilities, who actually in some cases manage facilities. Lismore Rugby Club is a good example where you know, they've built their own clubhouse. Edinburgh Council have given Inch Park to them. They now look after it, they allocate it. Cricket, football, rugby are working closely together. It's a great success story. Whereas previously, growth was stunted because the clubs weren't really supported going forward. So happy to chat to you about the specific as well at the end of the...
No points to Colin Kelly for getting that in there. We all do it at times, but I think he raises broader points.
Sure.
You know, we all come across in our constituencies about, even when there is an acceptance of responsibility, whether it be a bowling club, a cricket club, we bump into investment in those facilities and the maintaining of those community assets due to the short length of lease, etc., prevents you getting a lottery grants to do the toilets or whatever, or indeed Sports Scotland. So there is a very interesting topic within the wider topics that we have here this morning. It's maybe something we can have some discussions for those who are interested in that area with you about how we could assist some progress. I'm sure others out with this committee even would be interested in some of that work. Nanette.
I mean, I have to say I've been very encouraged with what I've been hearing just now. I think especially for the younger people coming up, I hope that when we do look in 10 years' time that the legacy will definitely work. I presume you still have in your sights the people who would never think of sports clubs, never think of really active participation, the couch potato who might watch Commonwealth Games on the telly but would never dream of doing anything else, and actually are costing the health service an awful lot of money through obesity and all the other problems. So, I mean, do these people come into your plans? I hope they do, as far as trying to get them a bit more active.
Yes, the physical activity implementation plan, I suppose, in many ways, alongside the physical activity investment we make, is targeted at those groups that are maybe harder to reach. So that's why we've funded the Active Girls programme that Sports Scotland are delivering to target teenage girls to try and keep them active, because we know that they're reasonably active until the kind of S1, S2 and it falls off, and all the reasons we know about. And the Active Girls programme is looking at the kind of evidence base of using dance and things that girls are more interested in. As long as it keeps them active, it really doesn't matter, as long as it's something they want to do. And the other end of the spectrum, Pass for All, has been a really successful way of using walking as a tool to get people who have never, for decades in some cases, taken any activity whatsoever. Quite a few people being referred through Keep Well checks and through the health service to local walking groups, which have been tremendously successful. So we fund that quite extensively. The new National Walking Strategy is going to take that a step further about how do we use walking as an activity that's so easily accessible to everybody, to really step that up and get people who are currently not active in some way. There's also good evidence to show that once somebody becomes active, quite often, that they'll want to become more active. So you'll get quite a lot of crossover from the walking groups to maybe the jogging groups, and you see people beginning to expand the amount of activity they're taking, but getting them to take that first step is the challenge. But once they do, they tend to be quite enthusiastic, and a lot of the volunteer walkers are people who were there themselves and have come through with a very sedentary lifestyle to quite active. So there's not a magic bullet. It's trying to provide something for everyone, and the variety and making it easy. Those are two examples, I suppose, of where they've got broad appeal, but they're also targeting quite hard to motivate folk sometimes.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that the health service may be initiating some of this, because I was thinking in terms of maybe the 40 to 50 to 60-year-old who, you know, just doesn't do any exercise at all.
Well, the brief intervention that's been developed for physical activity that's been tested, which we would want to roll out, Andrew Murray, Dr. Murray, had pioneered this, and he has developed the brief intervention, which is, as I say, being tested out at the moment, but would work in the same way as a brief intervention on smoking or alcohol. Essentially, it's a moment to have that conversation with a patient about their lifestyle, the amount of activity they undertake, but to then signpost them somewhere locally that is easy for them to. So I think that's a really good way of using the broad workforce of the NHS in a way to signpost people. Now, obviously, you can't force folk. It's all voluntary, but you can incentivise, you can encourage, and sometimes that conversation is enough for somebody to take stock that they're actually doing, you know, in terms of their blood pressure, their general health, can have a marked improvement if they undertake physical activity. And it's just getting that message across in that one-to-one opportunity with a GP or a nurse or whoever the health professional is.
Just add a bit to that, because I was up in Oban the other day, and I was given a brief around a project called Healthy Options, which is connected to the local sports. It's a social enterprise, Atlantis Leisure, but for me it's a sport hub, you know, at the end of the day. But they've got a very well established programme, Healthy Options, which looks at people around the area who have got difficult health issues. And I had an inspiring conversation with a gentleman Murray, his name was, who'd had a brain tumour quickly followed by a heart attack. And his words to me was that the Healthy Options programme at Atlantis Leisure had saved his life, had got him back into being positive, got him back into part-time work. I mean, it was an inspiring story. Now, I think with good conversation with the NHS, and it would have to work both ways, because sport couldn't resource that locally itself. It would need the two to come together. But I think it's an inspiring story. If you can get up there, I would go and have a look at it. It's a really interesting one.
Just to add, you know, we've obviously tried to complement with our promotion as much of the healthy, active lifestyle, I guess, agenda as possible for people of all ages. And I think certainly our Sport Your Trainers, that on Commonwealth Day every year we've tried to promote over the past, I think now we're on our 4th year going, you know, try something new, become more active, and it builds a sense of awareness. But I think we've also been challenging people, again, positively challenging people to be more active, to volunteer, to be more creative, and that's also very empowering and does inspire a sense of the social connectiveness around an event like this. And what you typically see in games environments is that builds up a bit of trajectory and momentum that people want more of that. And so one of the things I think that's been absolutely brilliant is how so many different community-based organizations have grabbed a hold of the theme of the games and are using it in their normal programming to really inspire people. And I think from that standpoint, it's just, I think it really is creating momentum for people of all ages. And I think one final point in terms of values and rights and really embedding, planting the seeds, I think our partnership with UNICEF, one of the things that will continue well after the Games is this push for the Child Rights Journey Legacy Program, which really is working with schools across Scotland to let children know their rights which includes also a healthy, active lifestyle. And I think that that's quite important, which will, will impact our societies. And it's really children being able to lead the way. And that, as idealistic as that may seem, there's some really tangible investments that are now being made that I think are really going to benefit people for the long term and put a pressure on us all to become more active. I can certainly tell you with my two children and the theme of the Commonwealth Games, they're definitely holding me to account as well. So.
Thank you.
The Let's Make Scotland More Active review that took place in 2013, what are the lessons that we take out of that, and what actions will come from that review?
Yeah, well, I suppose the fact we're launching the physical activity implementation plan is really a kind of the next stage to that. It's recognise that getting people more active can't just be the responsibility of one part of government, so it's a cross-government plan. It looks at how do we, whether it's from cycling to getting people out their cars, going to work, or whether it's cross-government. Not just in my domain, thankfully. It's everybody's business. So I think that has emerged really as the kind of key plank of how we take that forward. Within that and underneath that, there's various initiatives about, well, how do we affect change? National Walking Strategy is part of that. How do we get people out walking? It's the easiest, most affordable form of physical activity. But there's other things like the cycling network, making it easier for people to cycle safely, and there's been investment, obviously, like Keith Brown announced around that. So it's trying to join up what government's doing and making it kind of making more sense of it, and trying to face it all in the one direction. If there was one magic bullet of how do we do this, it would have been done long ago. It's a long process, and there's lots of forces working against us in many ways. The advertising of kind of unhealthy food that we're then trying to get people more active to work off. It's a constant effort of trying to get people into a lifestyle that's actually going to lead them to be healthy through their childhood and into adulthood. It's not easy, and what we're trying to do is put all the building blocks together, and what I'm announcing tomorrow is a part of that. It's not the only part, but it's an important plank.
Opportunities to give to Sport Scotland to get some of that health budget, transport budget, and coordinate some of that.
I mean, in some ways...
We talk a lot. I think it's the right idea.
Yeah.
We talk lots about the preventive strategy, and we as a committee, all on board for that. And, if we can prevent someone going into the hospital, where we can increase socialisation and through exercise and, just going for a walk, that shouldn't be beyond it. Even me having good long walks rather than, rigorous exercise, it's an enjoyable experience, and it does you good. But do you take seriously the opportunities, and what, from Sports Scotland's point of view, and how are you ensuring that you've got a key role in getting good outcomes here? Yeah,
there's a lot of good practice going on locally that I think we would like to see showcased a bit more. I'm back to my system again, convener, about how do agencies and sectors work together. And just sitting in a room the other day in Oban with the NHS practitioners, with the sports practitioners, and the Healthy Options leader had a medical qualification as well. And just looking at how those two were beginning to work was the key for me. It's not a case about Sport Scotland taking that budget, it's about them deciding to work on it locally. Now, there is NHS Highland have still to make a decision on the future of this project. So I'm going to look at that one very closely, because for me it's a key. I was staggered. There's 3,500 people in the area that have acute conditions, which makes them fearful of actually being active at times. And this project's already got over 500 people involved in different degrees. So the closer we can get to joint working, not taking each other's resources, but the same outcome with joint work in practice is the way forward. And the Minister has said that needs to be looked at a national government level as well.
I was thinking more about a sharing philosophy rather than
Correct.
It's probably more evolution.
a cash
than,
grab.
It's probably more evolution than revolution, I think. But I think where the NHS has begun to be particularly interested is in the rehabilitation areas. So you see a lot of work, like the Peak in Stirling, for example, has got a rehabilitation suite with the NHS, refers folk who have had heart attacks, strokes, and so on. And the brief intervention, again, has been the NHS recognising its role and opportunity. I think a lot of that, though, is kind of further down the line. I think where we need to get better is at the preventative end, before folk are in the rehabilitation zone of something having happened to their health. So the brief intervention is part of that, but I think, again, earlier intervention, the NHS providing those opportunities. Part of one of the things they've also been looking at is their own estate as well. How do they use the NHS estate a bit more effectively? A lot of it is quite good open space, and again, they've been looking at how do we use the space around hospitals to get people more active, not least their own staff. So again, it's not revolutionary stuff, it's evolution, it's step by step, persuading the NHS that it's in their interest to do this. And again, if we can showcase some of the local examples and demonstrate that and show that to others, then hopefully we'll get a lot more buy-in across the country.
Good luck.
Thank you, Convener. In regards to the Commonwealth Games, I'm sure that every member of this committee will join with me in complimenting Mr David Griffenberg on the work that he's carried out over the last period, and wish him well for the opening of the Games. And I, as a couch potato, look forward to it. Also to the work that Mr Stuart Harris has carried out in regards to Sport Scotland. But can I pay particular tribute to the Minister for the drive that she has shown over the last period in regards to this. Now, I know we met in June of 2013 with you last, and I remember actually visiting, and the point that Bob Doris made earlier, visiting the new sports centre, the Velodrome, Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome, the facilities in the Athletes Village, and what a transformation for someone who doesn't stay in Glasgow but stays 14 miles outside Glasgow, to see the facilities that have been built in Glasgow by the government and through all the various agencies. And certainly the transformation is absolutely fantastic. Can I come on to my favourite point in sports hubs, and I'll remind Stuart Harris, who made a comment at the last meeting, and I remember it well. I want to see as many schools transferred into sports hubs as possible. We have 126, 59% has already been said, 150 by 2016. How many are we going to have after 2016? I know that's looking well into the future, but in my particular area, and the same as Gil Patterson said earlier, I have one sports hub, but another application in for a sports hub in a local facility. Can I highlight that, again, I've always had the drive over the years of being a politician, the cost. People just don't have the money to go out and spend £10, £15. And the point which impressed me in Glasgow was that they said they were going to keep the costs down for people to come in to entice people in. So what we're doing about cost, in the discussions we're having with the 32 councils, a lot of these councils have put their sports facilities into trusts. Are we having discussions with the trusts, which have been successful in some areas? In particular, I have to pay tribute to North Lanarkshire. The trust has been successful. And where does the criteria for people who want to establish a sports hub, what's the criteria in order for them to move this forward with trusts, in discussion with local councils and in discussion with local sports associations that are in their areas? A lot of questions, but thank you again for all the work you're doing, guys.
Well, thanks for that. I'm blushing. No, I think I'll answer broadly, and then Stuart can come in with some of the detail. I think the next phase for hubs is critical, and that's why we've been looking through the youth sport strategy about where do we go next after the first tranche, the 150. What do we learn from that? And I think the lessons we learn is that there's a real opportunity to focus very much on secondary schools. Now, I'm aware in your patch, I think the aim was 50% of secondary schools would become hubs. And that, I suppose, has been the conversation we've been having about how would we take that forward on a Scotland-wide basis. Now, clearly, that requires negotiation with the 32 local authorities, but with the resourcing, oiling the wheels of that a bit, how do we give the opportunity for every school that wants to become a hub to do so, and make sure that those who don't have access to the facilities of a hub. And I think in some ways that would be quite transformational, because you're talking about a huge number of schools, really every community at that point having a school within its locality, within reasonable distance, that has its doors open most of, if not all of the time. So that's part of the discussion we're having. How do we make that happen? How do we encourage local authorities to buy into that so that we can deliver a real change? In terms of the criteria, Stuart, you're closer to that.
I guess it's probably important to stress that our approach locally has always been an integrated one. So we have everyone round the table to make sure that there's a single plan and that everyone can contribute to that. Now, we're still a wee bit away from that because there are some differences of opinion. There is, for me, I think trusts have been a positive vehicle, but they are more and more having to be commercially driven. So I said earlier that there's balance between pay and play. We'll just go along and play with a club and community driver over here can sit very well together, but that will require that integration. The criteria around community sport hubs, in fact, this probably fits with clubs as well, just generally the more traditional type, is it's about bringing people together. So you have to show how you can bring people together. It's a range of different sports. There is an aim and an aspiration for communities to lead, not necessarily own, but to lead. And ultimately, we're looking to grow the capacity and the participation in that hub or club. Now, we have not put a rule book this size. It's a one-page of A4 with 4 or 5 criteria on it, and anyone can bring that forward. I haven't forgotten what I said about every school, and I think it's always right to have long-term ambitions, and I think schools in Scotland are perfectly placed to be great community sport hubs.
Affordability as well, Stuart, is part of the hub. And I think we've been quite clear with hubs that, you know, that part of the oiling of the wheels of helping Sport Scotland, helping them, is they've got to be affordable and not price people out of using the facilities. So I think we do recognise that cost can be a barrier. I think hubs are a good answer to that. Some are little cost or no cost.
It's interesting. I mean, our general research has shown that the charges are pretty much about the same generally. But what we're seeing is, I think I mentioned £62,000 to make Armadale work every year as a community sport hub. We're hearing the communities being much more positive about attaining that 62k by one shape or form. It's income, it could be grants, it could be fundraising. Now, the community benefit of that, I think, is really positive. Just people working together, being together, socialising together, with ultimately those that want to participate in sport doing what they want to do. But there's a real powerful community tool there that I'm excited about. But the integration is key. You know, we can't have people sitting outside the tent. Everyone has to be inside and talking about what they can contribute and bring to it.
Basically, you know, Mr. Griffenberg, can I highlight through my register of interest as the cross-party chairman for the Showman's Guild? Can I also compliment you in the work that you've ensured that local people are getting local facilities? And can I ask, well, maybe you won't give us the idea away, but the opening ceremony, is it going to be fantastic? And I hope that, with the greatest respect to the Minister, I hope you're not jumping out a helicopter.
Let's put it this way: it's definitely an area of focus right now, and we want to get the show off on the right step. So we're planning for it to be fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Getting Richard.
That's all I'm getting. That's all I want.
That brings us to an end of this session. Can I thank you, Minister, and Mr Harris and Mr Gavin for their attendance this morning and all the evidence you provided with, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future on this issue. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you. As we previously agreed, we are now going into private session.